Hey YouTubers, it's me, Lonnie Clark, Nuts for Art, Beyond Extinction Love. I think we're going to hit the goal of reading this book by the end of the month. Let's see if we can hit that target. We're back here, we're reading Black Like Me, the book that got white people involved in the civil rights movement, by John Howard Griffin, published in 1960. This takes place on December 1st, 1959. We're on December 1, 1959, page 126. I developed a technique of zigzagging back and forth. In my bag, I kept of damp sponge, dyes, cleansing cream, and Kleenex. It was hazardous, but it was the only way to traverse an area, both as a Negro and a white. As I traveled, I would find an isolated spot, perhaps an alley at night or a brush beside the highway, and quickly apply the dye to my face, hands, and legs, then rub off and reapply until it was firmly anchored in my pores. I would go through the area as a Negro, and then usually at night, remove the dyes with cleansing cream and tissues and pass through the same area as a white man. I was the same man, whether white or black, yet when I was white, I received the brotherly love smiles and the privilege from whites and the hate stares or obsequiousness from the Negroes. And when I was a Negro, the whites judged me as if fit for the junk heap, while the Negroes treated me with great warmth. As the Negro Griffin, I walked up the steep hill to the bus station in Montgomery to get the schedule for the buses to Tuskegee. I received the information from a polite clerk and turned away from the counter. "Boy," I heard a woman's voice, harsh and loud. I glanced towards the door to see a large, matriarchal woman, elderly and impatient. Her pinched face grimaced, and she waved me to her. "Boy, come here, hurry." Astonished, I obeyed. "Get those bags out of the cab," she ordered testily, seeming outraged at my lack of speed. Without thinking, I allowed my face to spread to a grin, as though overjoyed to serve her. I carried her bags to the bus and received 3 haughty dimes. I thanked her profusely. Her eyebrows knitted with irritation, and she finally waved me away. I took the afternoon bus to Tuskegee, walked through the southern town of great beauty and tranquility. The famed Tuskegee Institute, I learned, The famed Tuskegee Institute was, I learned, out of the city limits. In fact, the major portion of the Negro residential area is outside of the city limits. Put there when the city fathers decided it was the simplest way to invalidate the Negro vote in local elections. Still doing it, right, guys? The spirit of George Washington Carver hangs strongly over the campus. A quiet, almost hauntingly quiet area of grass and trees. It radiates an atmosphere of respect for the work of one's hands and mind, of human dignity. In interviews here, my previous findings were confirmed. With the exception of those trained in professions where they can set up independent practice, they can find jobs commensurate with their education only outside the South. I found an atmosphere of great courtesy, with students more dignified and more soberly dressed than one finds on most white campuses. Education for them is a serious business. They are so close to the days when their ancestors were kept totally illiterate, when their ancestors learned to read and write at the risk of severe punishment, that learning is almost a sacred privilege now. They see it as the only possible way out of the morass in which the Negro finds himself. Later that afternoon, after wandering around town, I turned back towards the Institute to talk with the dean. A white man stood in front of a Negro recreation parlor near the carriage entrance gates and waved to me. I hesitated at first, fearing he would just be another bully, but his eyes pleaded with me to trust him. I crossed over slowly to him. "Did you want me?" I asked. "Yes. Could you tell me where is the Tuskegee Institute?" "Right here," I said, pointing to the gates a block away. "Oh, I know it," he grinned. I smelled whiskey in the fresh evening air. "I was just looking for an excuse to talk to you," he admitted. "Do you teach here?" "No, I'm traveling through," I said. "I'm a PhD," he said uncomfortably. "I'm from New York, down here as an observer." "For some government agency?" "No, strictly on my own," he said. I studied him closely since other Negroes were beginning to watch us. He appeared to be in his early 50s and was well enough dressed. "How about you and me having a drink?" he said. "No thanks," I said and turned away. "Wait a minute, damn it. You people are my brothers. It's people like me that are your only hope. How do you expect me to observe if you won't talk to me?" "Very well," I said. "I'll be glad to talk with you." "Hell, I've observed all I can stomach," he said. Let's just go get roaring blinko drunk and forget all this damn prejudice stuff." "A white man and a Negro?" I laughed. "We'd both hear it from the merciful Klan." "Damn right, a white man and a Negro. Hell, I don't consider myself any better than you. Not even as good, maybe. I'm trying to show some brotherhood." Though I knew he had been drinking, I wondered that an educated man and observer could be so obtuse, could create such an embarrassing situation for a Negro. "I appreciate it," I said stiffly, "but it would never work." "They needn't know," he whispered, leaning in close, an almost frantic look in his eyes, as though he was begging me not to reject him. "I'm going to get soused anyways. Hell, I've had all I can stand. It's just between you and me. We could go into the woods somewhere. Come on, for brotherhood's sake." I felt great pity for him. He was obviously lonely and fearful of rejection by the very people he sought to help. But I wondered if he could know how offensive this overweening brotherhood demonstration was. Others stood by and watched with frowns of disapproval. At that moment, a Negro drove up in an old car and stopped. Ignoring the white man, he spoke to me. "Would you like to buy some nice fat turkeys?" he asked. "I don't have any family here," I said. "Wait a minute," the white man said. "Hell, I'll buy all your turkeys just to help you out. I'll show you fellas that not all white men are bastards." "How many you got in there?" He looked into the car and saw several live turkeys in the back seat. "How much for all of them?" the white man asked, putting a $10 bill from his pocket. The vendor looked at me, puzzled, as though he did not wish to unload such baggage on the generous white man. "What can you do with them when you get them out of the car?" I asked. "What are you trying to do?" the white man asked belligerently. "Kill this man's sale?" The vendor quickly put in, No, mister. He's not trying to do that. I'm just glad to sell you the turkeys you want. But where you want me to unload them? You live around here?" "No, I'm just an observer." "Hell, take the $10. I'll give the damn turkeys away." When the vendor hesitated, the white man asked, "What's the matter? Did you steal them or something?" "Oh, no, sir." "You're afraid I'm a cop or something?" The unpardonable had been said. The white man, despite his protestations of brotherhood, had made the first dirty suggestion that came to his mind. He was probably unaware of it, but it escaped none of us. By the very tone of his question, he revealed his contempt for us. His voice had taken on a hard edge, putting us in our place, as they say. He had just come here. He had become just like the whites he decried. I didn't steal them, the turkey man said coldly. You can come out to my farm. I've got more there. The white man, sensing the change, the resentment, glared at me. Hell, no wonder nobody has any use for you. You don't give a man a chance to be nice to you. And damn it, I'm going to put that in my report. He turned away grumbling. There's something funny about all of you. Then he raised his head towards the evening sky and announced furiously, but before I do anything else, I'm going to get drunk. Stinking drunk. He stamped off down the road towards open country. Negroes around me shook their heads slowly with regret. We had witnessed a pitiful one-man attempt to make up for some of the abuses the man had practiced against the Negro. It failed miserably. If I had dared, I would have gone after him and tried to bridge the terrible gap that had become between us and him. Instead, I walked to the street lamp and wrote in my notebook, we must return them to their lawful rights, assure equality of justice, and then leave everybody else to hell alone. Paternalistic, we show our prejudice and our paternalism. We downgrade their dignity, unquote. It was too late to visit the dean of Tuskegee, so I went to the bus station and boarded a bus for Atlanta via Auburn, Alabama. The trip was without incident until we changed buses at Auburn. As always, we Negroes sat at the rear. 4 of us occupied the back bench. A large, middle-aged Negro woman sat in front of us to the left. A young Negro man occupied the seat in front of us to the right. At one of the stops, 2 white women boarded and could find no place to sit. No gallant Southern white man or youth rose to offer them a place in the white section. The bus driver called back and asked the young Negro man and the middle-aged Negro woman to sit together so the white women could have one of the seats. Both ignored the request. We felt the tensions mount as the whites craned to stare back at us. A red-headed white man in a sports shirt stood up, faced the rear, and called out to the Negro, "Didn't you hear the driver? Move out, man." "They're welcome to sit here," the Negro said quietly, indicating the empty seat beside him and the one beside the woman across the aisle. The driver looked dumbfounded and then dismayed. He walked halfway to the rear and, struggling to keep his voice under control, said, "They don't want to sit with you people. Don't you know that? They don't want to. Is that plain enough?" We felt an incident boiling, but none of us wanted the young Negro who had paid for his ticket to be forced to vacate his seat. If the woman did not want to sit with us, then let one of the white men offer his seat, and he could come sit with us. The young Negro woman said no more. He gazed out the window. The young Negro, the man, not the woman. Sorry. The young Negro said no more. He gazed out the window. The redhead bristled. "Do you want me to slap these 2 jigaboos out of their seat?" he asked the driver in a loud voice. Oh my God. We winced and turned into mummies, staring vacantly, insulating ourselves against further insults. "No, for God's sakes, please, no rough stuff," the driver pleaded. One of the white women looked towards us apologetically, as though she were sorry to be the cause of a scene. "It's all right," she said. "Please," asking the driver and the young man to end their attempts to get her a seat. The redhead flexed his chest muscles and slowly took his seat, glaring back at us. A young teenager sitting halfway to the front sniggered. Man, he was going to slap that nigger, all right. The white bully was his hero, but other whites maintained a disapproving silence. At the Atlanta station, we waited for the whites to get off. One of them, a large middle-aged man, hesitated, turning and stepped back towards us. We hardened ourselves for another insult. He bent over to speak to the young Negro. I just wanted to tell you that before he slapped you, he would have had to slap me down first, he said. None of us smiled. We wondered why he had not spoken up while whites were still on the bus. We nodded our appreciation, and the young Negro said gently, "It happens to us all the time." Well, I just wanted you to know I was on your side, boy. He winked, never realizing how he revealed himself to us by calling our companion by the hated name, Boy. We nodded wearily in response to his parting nod. I was the last to leave the bus. An elderly white man, bald and square of build, dressed in worn blue work clothes, peered intently at me. Then he crimped his face as though I were odious and snorted, "Pew!" His small blue eyes shone with repugnance, a look of such unreasoning contempt for my skin that it filled me with despair. It was a little thing, but piled on with all the other things, it broke something in me. Suddenly, I had had enough. Suddenly, I could stomach no more of this degradation, not of myself, but of all men who were black like me. Abruptly, I turned and walked away. The large bus station was crowded with humanity. In the men's room, I entered one of the cubicles and locked the door. For a time, I was safe, isolated. For a time, I owned the space around me, though it was scarcely more than that of a coffin. In medieval times, men sought sanctuary in churches. Nowadays, for a nickel, I could find sanctuary in a colored restroom. Then, sanctuary had the smell of incense permeated walls. Now it had the odor of disinfectant. The irony of it hit me. I was back in the land of my forefathers, Georgia. The town of Griffin was named for one of them. I, a Negro, carried the name hated by all Negroes, the former Governor Griffin, no kin that I would care to discover, devoted himself heroically to the task of keeping Negroes in their place. Thanks in part to his efforts, this John Griffin celebrated the triumphant return to the land from which his people had sprung by seeking sanctuary in a toilet cubicle at the bus station. I took out my cleansing cream and rubbed it on my hands and face to remove the stain. Then I removed my shirt and undershirt, rubbed my skin almost raw with the undershirt, and looked at my hands in the mirror. I could pass for white again. I repacked my duffel, put my shirt and coat back on, and wondered how I could best leave the colored restroom without attracting attention. I guessed it was near midnight, but the traffic in and out remained heavy. Oddly, there was little of the easy conversation one generally hears in public restrooms, none of the laughter or woofing. I waited, listening for footsteps come and go, to the water sounds of hand washing and flushing. Much later, when I heard no more footsteps, I stepped out of my cubicle and walked towards the door that led to the main waiting room. I hurried into the crowd unnoticed. The shift back to white status was always confusing. I had to guard against the easy, semi-obscene language that Negroes use among themselves. For coming from a white man, it is insulting. It was midnight. I asked a doorman where I could find a room for the night. He indicated a neon light that stood out against the night sky. YMCA, only a block away or so. I realized that though I was well dressed for a Negro, my appearance looked shabby for a white man. He judged me by that and indicated a place where lodging was inexpensive. Oh man, we're right at 20 minutes. I'm going to stop. We're on December 2nd. What page is this? 134. So we'll stop here, and I am going to read again tomorrow. It's getting really good, isn't it? I don't know, you guys. It's a very inspiring book for me. Put your courage feet on. And remember, happiness is resistance. So don't let anything that's going on in the world get to you. You know, find ways to keep your happiness up. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Ciao.